Too easy. All right. Well, we might kick off. So I'd just like to welcome everyone to the webinar tonight. My name's Rob. I'm obviously I'm a council officer with the City of Casey, working with the clubs in the southern area of the municipality. So as I said, welcome to the evening. Hopefully it's a great session of lots of learning, and we can come away with a lot of things to implement at our clubs. I'd just like to start with the welcome to country. So the City of Casey proudly acknowledges the Wurundjeri, Bunurong and Bunurong traditional owners, Casey's Aboriginal communities and their rich culture, and pays respect to their elders past, present and future. So thank you very much for that. As I said, this is the first session of our 4 sessions we've got planned for the year. We're really keen to make sure that we engage and provide as much opportunity for clubs to learn and develop and grow as we can. And one of the ways we want to do that is through these different webinars, or this webinar series. Tonight's topic, growing club, as you can see on the screen there. It will hopefully be some way in shape or form to help us continue to grow the clubs within our municipality. I'd just like to introduce our presenter for tonight and his organisation, Leisure Networks. So Leisure Networks is a regional sports assembly operating in the Barwon region, providing volunteer support, information, training and development opportunities to local clubs. Leisure Networks also supports work by the community, sport and recreation sector to create inclusive opportunities for people with a disability as a registered NDIS provider. So they've obviously got a wealth of experience and hopefully can teach us a thing or two tonight. We're very lucky to have Jessie from the organisation here tonight with us. Jessie's the coordinator of the community development at Leisure Networks and works across the greater Geelong and Melbourne region to develop and deliver existing and new programs for clubs, association and government areas of government. We also will have Monash Health coming along a little bit later in the evening just to provide some other additional information in relation to how clubs can improve themselves and support, and hopefully the programs that they can support and assist clubs with. Just some housekeeping items. If we could just have everyone turn their camera off and make sure their microphone's muted during the presentation, just to make sure we don't have any background noise and things of that nature. You should be able to see at the top of your screen, hopefully, a little camera and a little microphone that you can just switch off so that, we just don't have any background noise and the presentation can roll smoothly. Should you have any questions during the evening, please use the chat function, which is also at the top of your screen. It's a little sort of a bubble shape with a little triangle on one side. If you open that up and then you can type a message on the screen, I'll see the message and I can give that question to Jesse at the appropriate time when he comes to the end of that particular slide he might be presenting on. Also, if you do have any questions that aren't related to this evening, can you please leave those for tonight? We just want to make sure we focus on the session tonight and helping grow clubs as much as we can. If it's something related to your facility or maintenance or something along those lines, can you just please hold on to that and get in contact with your council officer, either by the call or an email tomorrow morning. And last thing from me, we are recording the presentation tonight, hopefully so that we can provide opportunities to actually come back and view it at a later time. We really see this as a beneficial opportunity for clubs, and obviously you may forget something or something along those lines, so we just want to make it an opportunity to ensure that it's available to view at a later time. So without further ado, I'll just invite Jesse to take over and enjoy the presentation, guys.
Thank you, Robert, for the introduction, and good evening, everyone. Firstly, I'm going to start by also acknowledging the Wadawurrung people of the Kulin Nations, the traditional owners of the land on which I'm presenting from today. And I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land you're all listening in from as well, and wish to pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. We are really excited to partner with the City of Casey for this online club development series, and we acknowledge the investment that's been made by the City of Casey to upskill you as club volunteers and members of the community as well. As Robert mentioned, if you've got any questions, by all means, feel free to either put them in the chat function, or I will give an opportunity between each slide for about 10 to 15 seconds if someone wants to take themselves off mute and ask a question before I then get stuck into the next bit of content. So I want to make tonight as interactive as we can. So by all means, if you've got a question, don't be afraid to speak up and ask it, because as I said, we want to talk, we want to learn from each other, and we want to make this session as interactive as possible. To set the scene for the club development series, so we have our session tonight on growing your club, and I'm going to shortly go through the details of what we're going to cover in tonight's session. The second session in the series is focused on volunteer management. So in that session, we're going to go through the 3 R's in volunteer management. So that's recruitment, retention, and reward, as well as how to provide leadership to your volunteers and how to target potential individuals to fill roles. Obviously, coming out of COVID, that's been something that's been a big hit for clubs, is your volunteer numbers. So that session itself is going to give you some different ways that you might be able to tap people on the shoulder or approach certain individuals to help your club, and also rewarding and making the most of your current volunteers as well. The third session in the series, we're going to cover financial sustainability, and that's going to be delivered by our partner, More Australia. So in that session, we're going to go through tips on how your club can stay financially sustainable, tips for engaging and keeping sponsors, looking at potentially some alternative income streams that your club could investigate, as well as tips for managing your finance and what is the tipping point for viability. So a lot of you might have heard the word going concern through COVID, and I'm sure that was something that was keeping you awake at night for some clubs, but this is going to be a really a beneficial session and a really forward-thinking session, so you can put your club in the best space going forwards. The last session in the series is going to cover all things marketing. So we're going to discuss matching a product with a market, identifying what you are selling as a club, because effectively your participation opportunities, your services are a product that you're selling. We're going to look at what makes you as a club better than your competitors, how you sell your services and to who you sell them to. We're also going to cover the role social media can play as a communication tool, how you can effectively use social media platforms, and different ways that you can use marketing for the benefit of sponsors. Each of these sessions are going to be delivered online in the same format that we're doing tonight, and I've listed the dates of the sessions on this slide if you haven't already got them, but council themselves will be in communication about all these future sessions. As a bit of an introduction activity for tonight's session, as I said, I want to make it as interactive as possible. I'm going to actually ask each of you to test out the chat function. So if I can get you to write in that chat function, so your name, the name of the club you are here representing tonight, and also if you're comfortable to an off-field achievement you've been responsible for or that you've seen in your time at the club. So I'll give you a couple of minutes just to fill this out and get familiar with the chat function. But I really want to see the type of clubs we've got in the room tonight, and also some things that you're proud of as through your involvement with the club. If you're struggling with the chat function at all, if you want to unmute yourself and introduce yourself through the video, by all means, but hopefully you've all been able to find the chat function. We've got Brett from Devon Meadows Tennis Club. Got cricket represented, awesome. Cycling as well, excellent. We've got a good mix tonight, which is fantastic. Give about another 30 seconds to a minute for anyone else who, getting used to the chat function. We've got Tracy from the Berwick North Juniors, Secretary of Hallam Football Netball Club, at the senior club introducing a netball team's junior. Well, this is actually my first year technically, so waiting to see. That's fantastic. Awesome. I think it's Leanne, if I pronounce that correctly, working hard to get a few grants to get the Booker Court, electronic court, higher gate locking system installed. That's fantastic. And I'll touch on it later in the session, but grants, more so than ever, are such an important way that you can look to grow your club. And there is a lot of investment, whether it's from local government, from state government, from other funders. So that's fantastic to hear. All right, I might keep moving along, but again, thanks everyone for engaging the chat function. As I said, great to hear that we've got a good mix of sports in the room tonight, and some really good achievements. I'd really like to see that. So moving on to tonight's session itself, we are going to look at the elements of a growth strategy for clubs, how setting some benchmarks and targets can help in your growth, ways that you can look to build synergies with community organisations, so universities, other businesses that can help your club. Really importantly, the use of community data, populations and demographics as well, and how you can really utilise that in your current operations, and if you are looking to grow as well as looking to make sure that your services and your offerings that you have are geared towards the growth within your community. So matching up that data and the particular user groups within your community, and lastly, how to put strategy around your growth. So really ensuring that you have that future sustainability and clear focus areas for your club moving forwards. I will just briefly mention that, look, a lot of these words, and when we do these type of sessions, a lot of these words can come across as fairly corporate and business, but I really want to emphasize that once we go through them and explain them, you'll see that there is really clear benefits and opportunities for clubs if you can look to take on board some of these different ideas. So whether it is kind of growth, benchmarking, targets, strategic plans, initially might come across as really corporate, but taking it down to club level can be a really, really good way to put your club on the right track moving forwards. So to kick off the content itself, putting it simply in a sporting club context, a growth strategy and a growth mindset is really about setting a plan as a club to overcome your challenges, to realise your goals for growth. And look, I've touched on COVID a little bit already, but it was a really obviously difficult time during the COVID crisis for sport, and particularly to focus on anything other than what was immediately in front of you as the short-term challenges. But look, it's really important to allow your club to take time, and we use this metaphor, on the balcony rather than always being on the field, and really focus on the day-to-day stuff. So being on the balcony is really observing the way your club currently operates, and ways to move it forwards. And that's really imperative to ensure long-term sustainability of your club. You really got to have that eye for the future rather than what is just on the immediate horizon. And as I said, it's tough when the volunteer pool is stretched so thin, and your volunteers have been asked to do such a lot within the club. But it is really important to take the time to put on your committee member hat, or put on your kind of key club volunteer member hat, to have a look at that real future planning for your club. We're going to go through a few of these, the dot points on the screen at the moment, in depth throughout the session. But look, in summary, Clubforce have put together the following 5 tips to help your club stand out, to ensure continued growth through really setting a strategy. So firstly, and again, COVID, this was really further emphasised and strengthened during this COVID crisis. Clubs are really well set up for continued growth if they can really harness within their club the sense of community. People really want to belong to something, that they want to feel the reward of being associated with a successful club and the community within the club. So as a club, either look to really instill this, or harness it if you already have that real good, that really good emotional connection amongst the members. We're going to go through it as part of doing sport differently models, but have a think about what you can do as a club beyond even just the on-field programs that can really help in your growth. Have a think about, do you have any social events, which are obviously COVID safe, that you could put on as a club to really help with important funds, but also open the doors of your clubs to potential new contacts or members. Secondly, in the process of aiming to grow as a club, you really need to be able to set benchmarks for where you think you should sit, and then targets over certain time periods in different categories. And we're going to go into more detail with this on the next slide. Within those kind of different categories, you might be looking at overall revenue, participation numbers, potentially sponsorship. Whatever it is, it's really important to set some indicators so all in the club can work towards that common goal of the growth category you're looking to really target. Thirdly, and we're going to go into great detail on this next session, but it's really imperative in the long run that you have a volunteer base that can really match the needs of your club through the growth. As I said before, we know this has been really difficult for some during COVID with your volunteers walking away and tasks being stretched between few. However, if you can, look, if you're looking to really increase participation numbers, you need to be able to have people off the field or in the key roles associated with the club that can really harness that growth and fulfill the roles needed. So whether that be coaches, managers, match day officials, if you're going to increase the on-field side of things, you also need to make sure as a club, as much as you can really have the off-field support structures that match that. Fourth, don't be afraid to be innovative and think about ways your club can do things differently. As I said, we're going to touch on this later in the session, but look, differently can be the terms of the services you offer and the different options available within those services. Lastly, for sustained growth as a club, you need to ensure that you have a presence in the community. So if someone new was looking to participate in the sport, would they know that your club is somewhere that they could go to as a first choice? If you are doing things differently off-field or on-field, how do people know you're doing that? We're going to go into, as I said, we're going to go into marketing your club in the final session in the program, but it's definitely worth having a think now about how your club is seen in the community and the ways that you can really spread the message of the good things you're doing as a club. Within all of this, it's really important in any growth strategy to be able to measure how you're tracking. So whether you're actually growing or not, you really need to be able to actually identify that. So look at your revenue, look at your participation and membership numbers, start to pick up on trends as they arrive, whether they're going in a positive or a negative direction. Start taking the time to really look at those numbers so you can kind of knock it on the head if need be, if it's going in a negative direction. But if it's going positive, how can you potentially harness that as well and really look to drive it continually going forwards? We touched on it briefly on the previous slide, but if you are looking to grow your club, you need to be able to benchmark your performance and set some goals and targets that you're going to be working towards. As I said, if you don't, how can you really tell how much you're actually growing as a club, if at all, and over time in comparison to where you probably should be given others in the community? Put simply, benchmarking is the process of comparing your club's performance or positions against other similar clubs. And targeting helps your club really assess how it is performing against the goals that you set coming out of that benchmarking process. So, for example, your club might want to increase participation in its women's football program within a set period. To be able to most effectively assess this, the club should undertake the process of assessing where it sits against other similar clubs or potentially even other sports. And once you have these figures in mind, you can then look to set as a club some clear numbers that you want to reach in terms of female participation by a certain date. So that as part of that gives you your benchmark as to where you sit, and then obviously the target in terms of where you want to be over that certain period of time. The process of benchmarking and targeting can also show your club where it might have some potential gaps or weaknesses and where immediate improvements can be made. And we're going to go through later in the session something that's called a SWOT analysis. Again, comes across as a very corporate word, but can really be well used within a local sporting club context. The graph that I've got on this slide shows this as another example. So if you're looking at kind of the improvement of your club over time in different areas, there might be kind of slow incremental improvement. However, if you continue to just do the same thing over time, you have the potential of potentially falling behind the trend of what other clubs and sports are doing. However, look, taking a circuit breaker and really understanding the process of some benchmarking and implementing the recommendations that come out of that benchmarking process, your club can look to move towards a best practice trend, and as part of that, really be ahead of the game, increase performance, rather than letting that gap continue to potentially grow between the best practice trend and how your club operates. Taking it back to some real life benchmarking activities you could do as a club, have a look at the activities others run and what make them so attractive. So if there's another club or another sport that has a really high participation number within your community, start to have a think about what makes it that. Why are more people likely to go to that club, and see if there's a way that you can potentially take some learnings from that. You could also look to benchmark your governance practices to see whether you are being run as a club to your best potential. So have you got the optimal kind of committee structure in place? Have you got volunteers in the key roles that you really need to fill? Have you got the right skill set within your volunteer group? These are all the things that you can start having a think about in terms of a benchmarking process. And amongst all this, we do really acknowledge that COVID has made it really difficult to dedicate time to these real forward-thinking exercises. But again, as I've said before, in the long run, it's really, really important to make that time as much as you can, so that you can have some clear direction and goals to move towards within your day-to-day activities. So in terms of benchmarking and targeting, really taking the time to see where you're placed, consider some of the focus areas and recommendations you can implement, and then setting some targets to get there so you can really track how you are progressing as a club. In looking to grow your club, we've had a look already at some important elements of growth strategy and the importance of benchmarking and targeting. But ask the question, how can you lean on others in your community to assist in your growth process? And even better, how can you collaborate with another community group or organisation to really grow together for the benefit of your community? So we're going to touch on probably the most important collaborator shortly, being your local council. But speaking generally, collaboration can really help you by using some expertise and reach in areas your club doesn't operate. You can look to share resources. You can look at different ways to innovate, and it also can really help you build long-term relationships that can ensure sustainable growth for your club. The first thing to recognise about collaboration is that it is something that really best happens over a period of time. So look to, as a starting point, scope out the type of organisation you'd like to partner with and get to know them before you then broach the type of collaboration that you can explore. So look to really build those personal relationships and get to know the organisation and let them get to know you as a club. You'll see that we've included a quote on this slide: collaboration is a process, not an event. So effectively in this, we're saying that collaboration with other groups should be a continual exercise where you really look to explore different ways that you can work together. So as much as you can, don't look at it as a simple kind of one-off support opportunity. How can you really utilise each other into the future? Again, taking these back to some practical examples for local sports clubs, have a think about, so current or potential sponsors or partners. How can you potentially as a club do more than you just look to get their funds as support? What other benefits could they provide to help you grow? How could you as a club potentially offer something to them to be more attractive as a partner going forwards? And look, even if we think about volunteers, could you potentially use someone with a particular skill set? It might be, you might have a sponsor that's an accounting firm, or you might have a legal firm that's a sponsor. How can you potentially use them as a board member or use their skills within your club? All things to really start thinking about that can help in your growth process. Another one to have a think about is particular cultural or other support groups that could offer potential participants. So you as a club could be someone that gives those potential participants an opportunity to be involved in sport. So that they could, as a community group, really give you some potential long-term participants in the club, and you as a club can offer them the sense of being a part of the community in which they live as well. Another really big one, universities and potentially school groups as well, or TAFEs or other colleges, especially if you're looking for a larger volunteer pool. So do you need as a club particular skill sets that aren't really prevalent in your club at the moment? Could your club offer internships or placements for university students as a long-term program that gives students valuable volunteer experience? And for your club, it really offers your club the type of skills that you really desperately need. And lastly, we're going to show a case study at the end of the session around this that might help with your thinking around this side of things as well. But could you, as a club, kind of look to partner with a school potentially, or work with a school to potentially offer a different participation program for a particular school group? This obviously could give you as a club an alternative income stream, and for the school and the students, it gives them the opportunity to try your sport potentially in a more tailored program. So something that might more fit their age group, the times they like to participate, all things that you can start to think about as potential opportunities that you can look to really collaborate and build that synergy with other community groups and organisations. As I mentioned before, potentially the most important collaborator in your growth as a club is your local council. So local government authorities really play a significant role in providing resources, opportunities, and as we're going to go through shortly, really important data that it's going to help your club long term. So it is really, really important that you have that really strong, open and positive working relationship with your council. So again, I want to make this session interactive. So what I'm going to ask you to do, either through the chat function, or if you want to unmute yourself and kind of raise it as a group, I want you to have a think about what ways council can help your club in its growth process. So as I said, if you're comfortable, to take yourself on mute and we'll discuss it. Otherwise, put in the chat function. But some of the things we've discussed already in terms of growth, have a think about ways that council might be able to potentially help in that process, and we'll discuss it. Again, I might give you a minute or two just to have a think about it. Write it in the chat if you want, and we'll go from there. So we think about participation, grants, different ways that you might have, it might have been things already that council, you might have an example that council's already helped you with that you might want to share with the group as well. Brett, one-on-one consultation with council, important to growth. Dan, I don't know, in terms of the Booker Court hire, I don't know whether you're comfortable to take yourself off mute, but do you want to potentially, if you're happy to talk through that process that you went through in terms of getting a few grants? Shane, council's already helping with relocation from the 2021-2022 season. That's awesome. Moving to a higher growth area. Some lists of potential clubs. About 30 seconds more. And again, if anyone wants to take themselves off mute and discuss, more than happy to. All right, fantastic. I think we might keep moving on. So, look, a couple of things that I put a bit of a list together myself, and look, council obviously plays a really massive role in terms of managing facilities that you use, providing really important funding opportunities for clubs through grants and other options. And the other one obviously is supporting clubs with opportunities such as this club development series. So, as I said at the start, if you have that support of council in your corner because they see you as a well-run, strategically minded club, it's going to be hugely beneficial in the long term. So really consider. I think from the conversations we've had, I think there are some fantastic relationships. But look, always don't be afraid to kind of continue those discussions as much as you can, and really lean on your council as much as you need to really help in that growth process. In any type of growth strategy or plan, and as we touched on in the benchmarking and targeting content, it's really imperative that you understand as a club the data of the community in which you are located. So this includes variables such as age demographics, cultural backgrounds, socioeconomic backgrounds, participation trends and patterns, and any specific council plans on active recreation participation. This data is going to really help you then help guide your club by providing key detail needed for grant writing decisions. As you'll have undoubtedly seen, there have been an increase in the numbers of grants offered to community sport and the funds available. And as part of applications for important resources for clubs and their growth, you will be able to kind of put your club in such a better position to be successful in your application if you can support your arguments that you make with real evidence of need from those community demographics and data. Additionally, when you are looking to make internal decisions as a club about particular options for growth that you want to explore, something that we're going to touch on shortly, having that data at hand is really going to ensure that your decision is an objective, evidence-based decision and with an evidence-based lens on it, rather than just based on the opinions around the committee table or within the volunteer group. In terms of the services you offer as a club and the potential participant groups that you target, it can be really properly informed through understanding the demographics in your community as well. So is there a more prominent cultural or age demographic in your particular area? And does this change the type of services that you look to offer? Lastly, this information will also help you in tailoring the particulars around the services in terms of the type of activities that potential participants like, and as well as, really importantly, when they typically like to participate and how long they like to participate for. So having that data at hand is really important in terms of being able to make sure that your services fit those within your community. All of these considerations are going to really help your club significantly in having some strategy around its growth. And by failing to understand it, put it simply, you are potentially closing your doors on groups of new members that are prevalent within your community. We actually have some data specific to the City of Casey that we're going to briefly touch on shortly. But before we do that, I want you to have a think about the following. So now that you understand the importance of understanding your community's data and demographics, how do you then use this to offer services at your club that match the needs of those in your community? To give you some ideas and considerations to have a think about, we're going to work through two different models for recruitment and retention of participants. Firstly, the EAST model, and secondly, the Vic Health and the Centre for Sport and Social Impacts principles to doing sport differently. So firstly, the EAST behavioural model, and this says that to encourage behaviour, you need to make it easy, attractive, social and timely. So in terms of getting people involved in your sport or keeping them involved, a couple of things to think about. So consider online introductions and registration processes for new participants. Make sure that it's really easy and simple for them to sign up with your club or to join your club. Also have a think about making personal contact with the participants so that they have a friendly face that they can meet with when they arrive for their first session. So there's a couple of things to have a think about in terms of making it easy. In terms of the activity itself, it's recommended to include some fun multi-skill introductory games that really gently introduce them to the sport, and really importantly cater for different skills and abilities. So have a think about making sure that the game formats that you have can really keep everyone involved in the play as much as possible, rather than excluding some. You want to make them feel like they were really part of the sport and part of the game when they were there, rather than feeling like that it was maybe the better players that were more involved in the game and they felt more on the sideline. We touched on it in obviously the marketing side of things, but if people are having fun, use your marketing channels to share it. Again, you never know who might see this and it might encourage them to also join your club. Also have a think about how you can offer potential off-field opportunities for both new participants and members of the club to build those social connections and create the relationships. Really simply, the more people they know, the more likely they're going to stay with your club. In terms of timely, also make sure that you also consider different payment options that are flexible for different demographics. So as much as it fits within what is feasible for your club, try to make sure that you can cater for the circumstances of your potential new participants. The second model is the Vic Health and the Centre for Sport and Social Impacts principles to doing sport differently. So they provide some guidance, some guiding principles as to attracting, engaging, and retaining Victorians who are less active in sport. So 6 different principles. Firstly, if you identified a particular group or groups that you want to become involved in your club, engage with them as a target market when actually designing the services, so you can look to really understand the barriers that they've faced in the past to be involved in sport. You can look to then reduce them in terms of the services that you're offering, and fulfill their motivations as well. So an example of that, if your target market might have previously found that they couldn't participate due to maybe certain time constraints, you can then look to really tailor the time that you deliver the services to address this. The second principle to consider is looking at the participants as customers and consider their total experience. So when thinking about your services that you offer, don't just think purely about the on-field or on-court participation side of things. Think about what their first engagement with the club looks like. What does registration involve? What happens when they arrive at the club? And then what happens at the end of the session? So it's not just the on-court or on-field participation, it's the whole involvement they have with the club, and trying to make it as easy for them, as positive for them as possible, to really make sure that user experience is maximised as much as you can. The third principle is around ensuring that the services cater for different levels of skill, ability and fitness. And as we said previously in the East model, making sure that the activities keep everyone involved in the play as much as possible, and that some aren't excluded potentially because of their skill or fitness level. The fourth principle is ensuring your coaches have the skills, abilities and temperament to really maximise the participants' experience. So really, really important that when you are bringing potentially new people into the club, that they are dealing with your volunteers and your coaches that can really make their experience a positive one. So if they have fun, if the sessions run well, if they get on well with the coach and really feel welcomed, that obviously they're going to be more likely to want to come back to the club. The fifth principle is around ensuring as a club that you have in place a clear pathway for new participants to move from the introduction session through to different other participation options as their skills, their fitness or their interest changes. So where do they go to next if they want to continue their involvement? So you might look to have a come and try day to start with, but if they finish the come and try day, what's the kind of the channel that they can then follow to have that long-term involvement in your sport? So really making sure that you have a think about that participation framework that you have in place for those new participants. The last principle is around ensuring that you have the project management, the delivery plans and processes in place. So it is really just making sure that if you are looking to put on new service offerings, that you really consider the different variables around it, you have a good management structure in place. Everyone kind of understands the purpose of it, how it's going to run, and then what kind of outcomes you're looking to get out of it. It's going to, having those structures in place is going to really make sure that you can enhance the prospects of those offerings or services being sustainable in the long run. As we mentioned before, we've actually been really lucky enough to be provided with some key data specific to the City of Casey itself, which is going to help you in your planning for growth as a club in terms of some potential target groups. We'll note that this information is going to be provided to you separately. However, we want to touch on some of the key points that come out of the data. So as we go through it, have a think about some of the learnings from the Doing Things Differently models, and how you could potentially look to offer some new services or adapt your current services to maybe be more appealing to user groups within your community. Some of this data you might be really familiar with already, but some might be brand new and surprising. So again, taken into consideration when you think about your services as well. So as can be seen on this slide, the City of Casey is home to the greatest number of Afghan-born persons of any LGA in Australia. Half of those who arrived to Australia and then settled in Casey between 2006 and 2016 were born in either India, Afghanistan or Sri Lanka. And by postcode, Doveton actually has the highest rate of Bridging E visa holders in Australia as well. Within the City of Casey, and you can see some map references here on this slide as well, 15% of residents have limited English proficiency. 10% of residents have no internet at their home. And 67% of Casey residents are aged between 15 and 64 years of age. Look, as I said, you're going to note that there are specific suburbs that have greater variances from these average figures in the slide on the screen, and again, we'll provide this to you. But this data is so important in terms of within your particular area, what kind of demographics you're looking at. Lastly, in terms of the City of Casey specific data, in terms of cultural diversity, 38% of City of Casey residents were born overseas. 36% speak a language other than English at home, and 15% have limited English proficiency. Again, I'm going to touch on, there are some greater variances from those averages in particular suburbs. So again, have a look at the data specific to your area, but we're going to go, the next slide is actually going to take you through a case study video, and it is working with people from different cultural backgrounds and ways that you can potentially adapt your services to be fit for need, and can be really a really useful way of really looking to engage those user groups. Also, this video itself is a really good demonstration of a lot of the discussion points we've gone over in the session. So looking at collaboration, building connections with other organisations and groups, as I said, doing things differently in terms of the service offerings, and then how all this can tie together to really lead to growth for your club. I will say that depending on your internet connection, you might not be able to see the video totally clearly, but as a minimum, take in some of the messages that they are sharing, and we're going to provide the video to you all after the session so you can watch it again in your own time if you wish.
I like about tennis how it keeps you healthy and fit, and you get have a lot of fun and new opportunities.
You see the enjoyment, the excitement, they're really sort of talking the sport, they're starting to understand it.
Our ACE program, which stands for Accessible, Community and Equality, it's all about us working really closely together with clubs and coaches to make sure that their venue is as welcoming an environment as possible, and a safe environment for absolutely anybody who wants to take part in tennis, no matter what their background, what their gender or what their level of ability.
So we engage with the North Melbourne Footy Club, Vic Police, their Blue Light program, the local club, Royal Park Tennis Club, and then also Moonee Valley City Council. All these groups work together to deliver a 6-week program for local residents of the Housing Commission.
So having Jason from the Royal Park Tennis Club, the local coach there, was fantastic because he was able to explain to the participants where they can go after this sort of program. If they do end up going down there, which some of them hopefully will, they have a local contact, they have someone who they're comfortable with there.
Yeah, I really like it when I beat the boys.
The Keilor Park Tennis Club run a really fantastic club-driven program. They've engaged with their local school to create a fantastic opportunity for the kids to access the sport. Every week they bus 20 kids down to the local club from the school to have a session with the local coach.
Many of our kids are limited in what they do after school with socioeconomic barriers that we have to overcome. The value-added stuff that we get from this program is huge. Being part of a club is one, being active of course is fantastic, but also the care and support that Keilor Park Tennis Club provide our kids.
Just very friendly, come and it's a bit of fun because we know the kids are enjoying it. They're going to come back, they're going to speak about it at home, and we know from a school perspective they're getting more and more that are wanting to sign up.
Our role is really to provide a lot of encouragement and support, but also promotion for what they're doing, and also the provision of equipment, and we have a funding and a grant scheme as well.
A whole bunch of kids have actually stuck around and have actually joined Keilor Park Tennis Club in itself. They're playing Saturday morning competition. Even the kids that haven't been selected for teams, you'll see them around the club a lot more. Actually even inviting other kids that aren't involved whatsoever. So yet again, it's good for Keilor Park Tennis Club. Obviously very good for tennis in general.
As a small club, it's not something that we can entirely fund ourselves, so we do look to the likes of Tennis Victoria and the council and other sponsors wherever we can to sort of help us to keep that program running.
Yes, I'll play more tennis in the future, definitely, because I love it.
So as you would have seen through that video, a really great example of growth for particular clubs through a lot of the things that we've discussed. So around collaboration with a lot of different community groups, looking to identify within your community particular target groups that you really want to work with in terms of increasing participation and getting them involved in your club. And look, a really great way to potentially do things differently as well in terms of the services that you offer. All the things that I ask you to really think about as a club, what you can do, and in terms of future planning, what are some different ways that you might be able to be innovative and really look to expand on that growth. But look, before we wrap up the session, I want to discuss how strategic or action planning can really help guide your club in determining the focus areas moving forwards. As I mentioned at the start, strategic planning, action planning, really corporate words, but they are really, really well used within community sport nowadays. Put simply, strategic planning is effectively building a roadmap for the club that helps those with an interest, both internally and externally, to determine where it's heading, how it's going to get there, and then to an extent, who is going to take it there. So we say often when we're developing strategic plans that the roadmap is an important document for your club as a guiding point, but so too is the journey for developing it. So within a club, it really starts the important discussions. It gets debate happening over your priority areas, and it's designed to really bring everyone together with some clear goals and focuses moving forwards. In terms of the strategies for growing your club that we have discussed, the process of assessing where your club currently sits in terms of its strengths and weaknesses, and then determining key focus areas as part of this process moving forwards will really help guide where you really see the growth coming from. So is it going to come through increased participation numbers in a particular demographic, maybe through a new service? It might come through increasing your volunteer numbers, potentially your revenue, and look, it might even come simply from having an increased presence in the community. There are a range of different areas that we have discussed that can help your club in its growth, but it's really important to identify which of these you're going to focus on. Assign particular tasks as part of that, and then some timeframes around really achieving the tasks. So we're going to have an activity that we're going to run through on the next slide that we're going to ask you to spend a bit of time considering. If you've got a Word document in front of you that you can open up, a blank piece of paper, even on your phone, just to start thinking about. We're going to spend just a couple of minutes doing it just to introduce you to the process. And then, look, I ask you following the session to really go back with your club, with your committee, with your volunteers, and maybe go into this process in a bit more detail to really take that time to step back. As I said before, spend time on the balcony and really consider where you might see within growth within your club, where that might actually fit. So, look, as I said, the activity I want to briefly touch on here is to run through a SWOT analysis and action plan overview. So these blank documents that you see on the screen, so we've got the SWOT analysis in front of you here. The next slide is an action plan. They're housed on our Club Help website, which I'm going to talk about at the very end of the session. But for tonight, as I said, just have a blank piece of paper or a Word document open if you can. A SWOT analysis effectively means that you're thinking about what your club's strengths are, what its challenges or weaknesses might be, some potential development opportunities, and what might be some threats to your club or some gaps. It's a really great starting point to be able to take a deep dive into your club's current operations and where it stands. And from this, you're going to be able to start to identify some potential focus areas, either good or bad, that can become priorities under your action plan or your strategic plan for your club's growth. One of the things we say with the SWOT analysis is that sometimes the focus areas are going to start kind of when you go through the process of writing them down. They'll start screaming at you kind of off the page as you'll start noticing them straight away, what they might be. But don't get stuck in kind of focusing on what your challenges or weaknesses or what your threats might be as kind of your focus areas. Your club might have some really good strengths that you can look to potentially take to the next level that could really set yourselves apart from other competing clubs or other competitors. So as I said, don't just get caught on kind of what your weaknesses are. Look at what your strengths might be and how you can take them to the next level as well. What I'm going to ask you to do is, again, we're just going to take a couple of minutes. I want you to really quickly just start the process of working through an action plan for your club currently. So have a think about starting to note down what you perceive as what your strengths might be, some opportunities to develop, weaknesses and threats. At least start the process so you can really have in the back of your mind, okay, from the things that we've discussed in terms of some growth strategies, what are some of these things that can fit within this graph as where you currently sit? Whilst you're taking the time to go through that, if anyone's got any questions they wish to raise or if they want to put in the chat function, by all means. I'd love to know as well if there's any clubs in the room tonight that have actually already got a strategic plan in place. If you want to potentially share that, whether you do or you don't, and if you do, maybe some potential learnings or how it might have helped you already. As I said, about a minute or two before we move on to the action plan, and I'll show you what that looks like. About another minute. Has anyone got an action plan in place at the moment? Anyone that wants to, or a strategic plan that they want to potentially take themselves off mute and share?
Hello, this is Leanne from the Hallam Tennis Club. We were part of the City of Casey's pilot program with Terry Dillon about strategic planning for our club. That was maybe 8 or maybe 2 years ago now, I think. And so that was quite an involved process with a few meetings at council, and then Terry Dillon came to our place. But we have not been able to meet any of the targets that were put in place because I think Terry was used to dealing with very big, very, very big clubs. We're a very small, very loyal club, but not many people helping out at the club. It is a very small group of people who run the club, and most of the targets that were set were almost impossible for us to reach, and most of the strategies that were suggested for us to get there didn't apply to such a small volunteer run club. Maybe for the bigger ones would have been great. I'm sure it would have worked for footy clubs, but a very small tennis club. So we're a little bit gun shy, I suppose, to get involved in any more of these SWOT analyses because it was not very useful for us at the time. I think it was aimed at a much bigger club with a lot more resources, a lot more volunteers, a lot more income streams, a lot more everything than a very small club like us. So hopefully if something's a bit more basic and the targets are a little bit smaller, maybe we can work towards meeting some of those things instead.
Yeah, yep, absolutely. And look, in terms of when we're talking about kind of setting goals and setting targets generally, it is really important, whether you do it yourself as a club or whether someone helps you with the process, making sure that they are obviously really achievable goals for your club. So one of the things we always say is that it's probably potentially can be one of the quickest ways for a kind of strategic plan to kind of get left on the shelf and kind of left behind if within your club, some people see it as not particularly achievable, so they don't have that real drive to achieve it, to hit those targets because they just don't think they can do it. So look, in terms of this process, when you do go through setting aside some focus areas, setting some tasks, making sure it is something that you can achieve as a club, so you really have that drive to actually to get to that end goal. Really important learning. But thanks for sharing, Leanne. What I might do next is move on to the action planning side of things. So again, we'll make these resources available to you. So if you want to take them back and start writing them down on the actual document itself. So on this page is the starting point of an action plan or a strategic plan. So within this particular process, you identify your particular focus areas from the SWOT analysis, and then you list some quick wins, medium-term wins and some long-term wins in terms of that particular focus area, and you give the tasks to someone in particular to be responsible for within your club. Super important that you assign those tasks so someone has, they know it's within their responsibilities to actually make sure that the club is moving towards achieving those goals, especially within a growth strategy, that you have those people that know that that's their responsibility, and that they're going to make sure it gets seen through. Using, so on the previous slide, I've had an example in terms of using a club might look at potentially their weaknesses being that they might have within the club that they as a particular strength that they've got a diverse membership base, but as an opportunity they aren't potentially promoting this as well as they could be, or through their social media and website. So in terms of how that then translates into some focus areas, within this you could have a quick win that you do an audit of the type of social media platforms that your members are using and at what times. Medium-term wins could potentially be that you then create a bit of a marketing plan. So again, another really corporate word, but something that can be really easily done by clubs themselves in terms of when you will post content about your current members and the diversity and on what platforms. And as a long-term win, you might then set some targets around engagement with potential new members online and turning them into registered participants. So people that have used Facebook, people that have used Instagram, you'll see that you can get some really good data around what type of content that people like, when you put it up, when's the most engaging kind of periods that you can put it up, and then you can really start to set some targets around, if you're looking to bring more participants on board, what type of you want to achieve certain people potentially coming into the club by a certain time period. That's your kind of long-term win strategy. So that's where you start to set, again, some targets around that as well. I've just used that as an example. There's so many different ways that you can look to grow your club, but just to give you an example on how that might work. Look, again, ultimately these are a great way to bring out what the particular focus areas for your club should be moving forward, and setting some clear actions to achieve your goals. So look, I won't give you, I'm mindful of time going through tonight because we have got Monash Health joining us. But again, I will share these resources with you. Once you've done a SWOT analysis, I'd really recommend sitting down and going through, whether you do it internally, whether you look to engage someone externally, going through the process of really setting some strategy around that growth, so that you know what your priority areas are. So you might see that there might be 5 or 6 or 7 different growth areas that you might be able to do as a club, but really starting to nail down, okay, what are the 1, 2, 3, whatever it looks like, that we really want to set as our main priority, main focus areas, and how we're going to achieve them. So really important process. In summary of the session, I'm just going to touch on a few different points that we've gone through. So remember the general tips around growth strategy within your club. So if nothing else, keep these in mind. So making your club a community, undertaking the process of benchmarking and setting some growth targets, ensuring that you place as paramount the real importance of your club's volunteers, and we're going to touch on that next session in more detail. Looking to do things differently with your services, and really ensuring that your club has a presence in the community. Secondly, within these kind of growth strategies, have a think about where you might be able to build some synergies or relationships with other organisations and community groups that can help in your growth. So where can you kind of lean on each other and look to develop from each other's skill sets to really see that growth within your club and within your community. Thirdly, understanding the importance of your relationship with the City of Casey, and do all you can as a club to make this a really positive one. Fourth, as we went up through before, and this can be something that you can get through the City of Casey, is the real key data and demographics of the community in which you are located, and how this can really help when you are looking to target your particular growth strategies. Fifth, once you have all this information, have a think about ways that you can ensure your services fit the needs of those in your community. So you can have a think about either offering a completely new program, or maybe tailoring current programs, or even in terms of the programs that you're currently doing, they can still be the same, but what can you put around it to potentially make it more attractive to new participants? Or how can you market it in a way that is going to make it more attractive to new participants? Last but not least, with all of this in mind, how do you tie it all together in a really centralised place to make sure everyone is aware of your common goals and objectives to really ensure that growth, and there is some strategy around your growth? That comes through something like a strategic plan or an action plan, something that's documented, something that's agreed upon by all within your club, so that you can set it as your key direction. And within a strategic plan, don't be afraid to use it as an agenda item at all committee meetings. So you pull it out and say, look, these are what we set as our targets for growth as a club. How are we tracking towards them? Are these goals, as Leanne touched on before, are these goals now no longer realistic? What can we do to potentially tailor them to make them more realistic? So we are still in that growth phase, but we might be able to hit that as a milestone. Something really important that we want to share with all clubs, it's been out for a while, but the current round of the Victorian Government Sporting Club Grants Program has actually been extended out for a second time. So it is now actually closing on the 11th of May. And within this program, it offers clubs really important funds across quite a range of different categories. So one of them even includes funds if you do want to explore the idea of a strategic plan further and go through the process of a detailed 6-month process for a strategic plan. You can get the funds to potentially engage someone to help your club with a strategic plan. We will provide the link to you if you haven't heard of this grant yet or you haven't seen it yet. But look, all I'll say is that it's a really awesome opportunity for your club to get resources to help in your growth process. Just before I pass back to Robert, I just want to give everyone any final chance. If you've got any questions or comments you'd wish to make, by all means, if you'd like to share now, either through the chat or unmute yourself, more than happy to answer any questions that you might have. I'm going to stay online through the Monash Health side of the presentation as well. So if there's any questions that you want to ask, if you feel free to put them in the chat box, and I can respond to them through the chat as we go through that. The last slide for me, I just want to share, as I mentioned before a few times, our Club Help website. So this has a huge range of resources and templates that clubs can utilise across. There's a huge range of different topics on that website. So click on the link, go for your life, take the templates and use them as you see fit as a club. We've designed these so that you don't have to reinvent the wheel. So if you are looking at particular areas of growth that you want to target, whether it is participation, volunteers, governance, sponsorship, revenue, whole different range, you'll find some really great resources on this website as well. Look, thank you again for the opportunity to present tonight. I hope you've learned a lot through this session, and we're really looking forward to the remaining 3 sessions in this series. I'm now going to pass back to Robert to introduce the team from Monash Health.
Thanks, Jesse. Just before you go, we did have a quick question from Brett. What's the best way to reward volunteers?
Yeah, good question. And look, I'll pump up the next session, Brett. That's something that we go into detail in next session. But look, one of the key ways, obviously, for volunteers is they want to feel appreciated, and the amount of time that they put into the club. The little things can really matter going back the other way. So whether it is acknowledgement at, you might have club dinners, you might have events, acknowledgement at that of the work that people do, you'd be surprised how much of an impact that can have, that they really feel like at the end of the day, that the work they do really contributes to the positive culture within a club. There might be some development opportunities that, look, they might see that there might be some volunteers within your club that volunteer purely because they just like being involved in the club, but there might be some volunteers that actually see that as part of a development journey. They might see themselves potentially as future presidents of the club, future leaders going forward. So maybe have a chat with them about why they are volunteering and where they want to head with it. And if there is a way for you to potentially help in their development process, it might be, as a club, help them find some development opportunities, whatever it might be, there is some opportunities or chances for you to really invest in them and make them feel like they are a really key and valued member of the club going forwards. They're just a couple anyway, Brett, but as I said, session 2, we're going to go into that in much greater detail. So I'd highly recommend have a listen to that.
Thanks, Jesse. Greatly appreciated. And I guess just from my perspective, one of the things that I've really taken away is I guess I can't remember how you framed it, the overview looking rather than being in the game.
Taking time on the balcony rather than on the field. It's super important. And look, a lot of it's been tough during COVID. We've had people speak that there are so few volunteers that all they can really focus on is the day-to-day stuff. But still within that, taking the time to actually step back a little bit. So important to actually make sure that your future steps are guided towards some kind of strategic direction.
Yeah, exactly. So, no, thank you very much for that. I will now look to pass to Cassandra and Christine. They are online here. I hope they can maybe unmute themselves and turn their cameras on so that we can see who they are. And get them to take us through the Healthy Sports Clubs component, which is presented by Monash Health. Over to you both.
Great. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Christine, and I'm a health promotion practitioner at Monash Health. And along with Cassandra, today we will be talking to you all about the Healthy Sports Club initiative. Next slide, please. We acknowledge the traditional owners of the land throughout Australia, wherever you may be, and recognise their continuing connection to land, waters and culture. I pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. Next slide. So just for a bit of a background on who we are. So we are part of the health promotion team at Monash Health Community, and we are based across the 3 local council areas of City of Casey, City of Greater Dandenong and Cardinia Shire Council. And we work to support the health and wellbeing in community settings, including sports clubs, schools and recreation facilities. Now, this initiative actually helps provide support and assist sports clubs to create a healthier environment that promotes good health and well-being for the whole club and also the local community. Next slide. So Healthy Sports Clubs is a health promotion initiative for sports clubs in the local council areas that I mentioned earlier. And for this initiative, we have partnered with and are supported by local councils, including the City of Casey. Participation in this initiative is free, and we provide one-on-one on-the-ground individualized support for each club. This initiative can assist with the creation of a club environment that promotes health and well-being and build on what you are already doing. So including if you are already participating in other programs such as Good Sports. So we help to identify any actions you have already implemented and help you to streamline what you are already doing. Now, to assist your club, we have developed an easy-to-use framework. So I will explain this in a bit more detail in the next slide. And we also have 9 different health and well-being areas that you can choose to work on. And this includes inclusion and mental wellness. Next slide, please. So Healthy Sports Clubs can help grow your club by supporting you and your club to create a welcoming and inclusive environment for your whole club community. So we will assist your club with specific actions that will be identified in the 3 areas of the Healthy Sports Club framework, which are the club environment, culture, and club connections. And I will explain this in more detail as well in the next slide. We also support your club by providing relevant resources that we have developed and have also sourced from other organizations. We assist with capacity building, including through workshops, depending on which health area you're working on. And we can also link you up with local community organizations. The implementation of identified actions will enable your club to be a place where community members feel valued and welcomed. We can assist you with removal of barriers to participation, which will all help to create a more diverse club community. And creating a healthy and supportive environment will enable your club to be a club of choice within the local community through support offered for your club's health and well-being. Next slide, please. Next slide, please.
Should be coming up now.
Thanks. So this is the diagram that I had spoken about. So this is the Healthy Sports Club framework. So I'll just go into it in a bit more detail. So at the bottom shows that we don't work in silo, but we work in collaboration with other organizations, such as local government and sporting associations. The next layer shows the 3 components that we work within. So the first one, club environment, is where the physical environment at your club promotes healthy behaviors. This can include making your club more accessible and also having spaces that are welcoming and for socialization. Club culture is the next one, and this is where leadership and policies support and create a healthy club culture. So this can include having policies specific to the health area you are working on, and also role modeling by club leaders. Club connections is the final one, and this involves officials, members, players, families, and the wider community who are all engaged to create a healthy club. So this could include consulting with the club community on any new actions you want to implement for a health area. The next circle within the main components show the 4 stages that need to be completed when working on a health area. And we will assist you, so that myself and Cassandra will assist you with each of these stages. And they are commit to healthy change, create a game plan, initiate healthy change, and lastly, celebrate your success. And Cassandra will explain this in a little more detail in the next couple of slides. And at the center of the circle are the 9 different health areas that you can work on, and Cassandra will explain this in more detail in the next slide. Cassandra, over to you.
Thanks, Christine. So we have 9 health areas in Healthy Sports Clubs. You don't have to work on all 9. You can pick which ones that you feel are needed for your club or suit your context. So I'll just briefly go through each one. We've got healthy food and beverages. In this one, we've got level 1 to 3, level 1 being an attainable level and level 3 being the gold standard. And this one's about providing healthy food options at your club, whether it's at a canteen, a training night, or even morning tea or afternoon tea at your clubs. Physical activity and active recreation. This one's about unstructured and less competitive physical activity opportunities at your club. So it could include social sports, but it could also look at physical activities such as walking groups or anything like that, trying to get the families and the coaches and the officials more involved and active, because obviously the players are all really active at the club. Responsible alcohol consumption, we have 2 different ones. We have one for clubs with a licence and one for clubs with no licence. And this one, as Christine mentioned before, is done through Good Sports. So if you're a Good Sports club, you probably will already get ticked off for this area. The next one is preventing drug harm. So that's the prevention of drug use, which is recreational, performance enhancing and prescription, and associated harmful impacts on your club community is reduced, and that uses a primary prevention lens. So kind of goes really well with our mental wellness area, which is below. That one's about positive mental health of your club community is supported, and club officials, members, players and families feel safe, valued and included at your club. So we look at how to promote mental health at the club, but also how to provide support to people and referrals if needed. Injury prevention, so all about preventing injuries at your club as well as the management of them if any occur, but it also looks at the culture, so positive player conduct and reducing violence on field. Smoke-free clubs, this one's pretty self-explanatory. It looks at the current tobacco legislation, whether you're completely smoke-free or you have smoking areas, and utilises resources from Quit Victoria. Sun protection is about reducing sun exposure and heat illness at the club, and this one uses resources from SunSmart Victoria. And lastly, we've got inclusion, and for this one we have a few sub areas of inclusion that you can work on. We have culturally and linguistically diverse, Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander, women and girls, older people, LGBTIQ+, and people with disability. So you can choose to focus on just a general inclusion area and make sure that you are inclusive and not excluding anyone, or you could focus on a specific area that you would like to target and ensure that that group of people feel really included and valued to access your club. Next slide, thanks. So these are the steps which Christine showed you in the framework image before. And I'll just go into them in a little bit more detail so you understand what it involves. So step 1, commit to healthy change. So you would register for Healthy Sports Club. So we would have a meeting, we'd look at what you're currently doing at the club, and you would pick an area to focus on, and also inform the whole club of your participation, because we want to ensure everyone knows what's happening. Step 2, create a game plan. So in this one, we would meet again. We go through a set of targets for each of the health area that you want to focus on. Then we would look at creating a game plan from these targets. So there's obviously going to be a lot of things you're already doing at the club, so you won't have to work on those areas. It'll just be looking for places to add value to. Step 3 is initiate healthy action, and for this step you'll be obviously completing the actions from your game plan, sharing the responsibility across the club. So we'll also be here to support you either through email, phone call or regular meetings, and we'll also be supporting you through resourcing, linking you to other community organisations and talking through any barriers or challenges you might have at the club. And the last step is step 4, celebrate your success. So this is when you've completed a health area. We meet with you, we basically look at how you've done all your actions, and then we will organise a bit of a celebration at your club, which, you know, we might invite the City of Casey Council members and get the local media along to make a bit of a big deal about it. So once you finished Step 4, you would hopefully go back around and pick your new area and do that. So next slide, please. Yeah. So in this slide, we've just got some examples of actions that clubs have done in the past. So these are directly from game plans of clubs we're currently supporting. So one club recently created a pump up playlist for the club and promoted this on game day to support connection and mental well-being. Another club started a walking group with the parents because they noticed they were just sitting around during training times. They wanted to get them up and to get some socialising happening. Another club connected with Headspace, and Headspace then came in, held presentation sessions, and also attended a Thursday night dinner to show a bit of presence and provide support if anyone needed it. Some clubs have held alcohol-free events so that they're inclusive of everyone and family-friendly. They've held open days, guided tours, come and try or bring a friend days to try and get some more people into the club. Some have created a buddy system for new members or a welcoming pack, just so that new members don't feel scared when they start. And others have provided cultural and religious dietary options at the canteen, such as vegetarian options. The last one there is coaches. Another club has had coaches, players and families sign a code of conduct which outlines appropriate behaviour at the club. Next slide, please. So club outcomes, so we do evaluate healthy sports clubs, and these are some of the outcomes clubs have told us about. So one club has built a lasting community partnership with a local physio clinic, and then it's been a bit like a sponsorship. So they provided training for free and also discount to players who do need to access the physio. Another club was promoted on their council's social media page as an example of a club creating a healthy environment for the club community. So they had a whole write-up about that. The initiative is helping another club to provide healthy choices to schools that hire their venues. So they found that schools weren't hiring their venue when they weren't using it because they didn't have healthy options in the canteen. So when they did provide those healthy options, they found that more clubs wanted to hold their events there. Another club has an ongoing relationship with Headspace Pakenham, who attends all club events and provides that presence and support to members. Next slide, thanks. So thank you for listening and for having us attend your session today. It's been really great to present to you all. Christine and my details are on the screen. So if you would like to get involved in healthy sports clubs, please shoot us an email. We're more than happy to meet with you and have a chat about it all and help get you started. And thank you, City of Casey, and yeah, thanks for having us.
No worries. Thank you, Cassandra and Christine. That's the end of our forum tonight, everybody. So I'd just really like to thank you all for coming along. We hope you've found a lot of useful information there, and we'll be looking to distribute the information that we have presented tonight in the coming days, including the recording that we have made. Hopefully that'll be able to be done in the next few days as well. We're just working through that and the technicality of getting that across to everybody. So we'll work through that hopefully over the rest of this week. But yeah, I'd just like to thank our presenters for very much their time and their expertise. As I said, we'll send out that information, and we'll also be looking to get some evaluation from all of you guys. Okay, how we went about tonight, if it was a format that was engaging, provide you with the information that you feel you need, so that we can make sure that these sessions are going to be really, really worthwhile. So we'll look to do that over the coming days as well. But in closing, I'd like to thank you all for coming, and look forward to the next webinar in a month's time. Bye for now.